Welcome to the South America Realm screencast. I have had the opportunity to visit this fascinating realm in the country of Ecuador, including in the Andes and the outskirts of the Amazon and the Galapagos Islands, which will inform my presentation to you today. We're going to start off with an image that shows the great site of Machu Picchu in the Andes. This is a remnant of the great Incan civilization that occupied the altiplanos, the high plains of the Andes. One of the themes that we look at in this course and in this section of the course is looking at ethnic groups. This could be considered the ethnosphere, a term that's used in the video that you'll be having a discussion on this week. And in this case, we're looking at a particular characteristic that's described many times as plural or cultural pluralism. These are plural societies. You don't have a single majority. And in particular to Middle and South America, the mestizos are the mixed populations of people that share some heritage of European and indigenous and in some cases African as well. And this is as I said, a defining characteristic. Alexander von Humboldt was one of the great geographers, and he introduced the concept of unity of place, and this gives us a sense of a particular geographic locale that has both physical and human characteristics that define it. One of Van Humboldt's maps. If we look at the map of South America, we see the dominant country of Brazil and some of the major geographic landforms. Of course, the Andes mountain range, the longest mountain range on Earth, all along the west coast of the continent. We see the great Amazon basin, the greatest river system on Earth in terms of volume of water, and several geographic highland areas, including the Guyana Highlands, which we will be visiting in part on our summer 2018 expedition to Guyana as part of Shasta College's study abroad program this year. Plate tectonics informs our understanding of the realm. You can see that the South American plate covers the entire continent, and yet the Nazca plate is subducting or plunging beneath, and this is producing the great Andean volcanoes such as Cotopaxi in Ecuador, formed by this process of subduction, very similar to that producing the Cascade volcanoes, which this mountain shows a similar form to our familiar mountains such as Mount Shasta. We've all heard about the great Amazon basin, this hotbed of biological diversity, this self-perpetuating system that creates its own weather systems, produces very large volumes of rainfall, constant warm humidity, create this complex forest structure that supports among the highest terrestrial biological diversity on Earth, or biodiversity. We are still discovering new species in the Amazon and in some of these more remote areas, and it's quite remarkable to think that major species like dolphin are still being discovered. Of course, deforestation, the loss of these tropical forests is a major concern. This graphic illustrates the loss of land area in the Amazon basin through 2014, and you can see the acceleration of deforestation that occurred over this time period. the causes of deforestation, you see cattle ranching contributing the largest extent, small-scale agriculture and large-scale agriculture, major components, as well as logging and mining. You might be asking yourself, what drives deforestation? We can see the land demand by peasants motivated by government incentives, land being cleared for livestock, large corporate soybean farms, and other types of economic activities. The Brazilian government has actually provided incentives to poor people living in the crowded coastal cities to move into these interior areas, creating what's called a growth pole around the city of Manaus. And this is a concern, as this is part of what's been driving these very high rates of rainforest clearing. As I mentioned in the beginning, the great Incan civilization was centered in this area in the east, described here as the Andean peoples, distinct from those of the Amazon basin, for example. This map is intended to illustrate the Spanish and Portuguese colonial intrusion, with Brazil now speaking Portuguese. So you can see the Portuguese area of influence. They penetrated from the east, with the Spanish primarily coming in from the north and along the western coastline. This section we look at different types of agriculture. This map illustrates distinct areas of agricultural practices. The tropical plantation that is found along the Caribbean coast in the north and also extending along the coast of Brazil is a extension of what we saw in the Caribbean, and also contributed significantly to the slave trade. So we still to this day see a significant African derived influence culturally in these regions. Amerindian subsistence agriculture dominates in the high elevations of the Andes. This is something of a remnant of the population of the Incans. In the south, we see a commercial, export-oriented, highly industrialized agriculture system like we have in the United States, with lots of capital inputs, very energy intensive, but not a particularly large workforce required for that. Export-oriented. And then we see some traditional and undifferentiated types. Okay, Brazil, of course, a huge state by any measure, top 5 in both population and area of states in the world. Urbanization is an important theme and is one that is a focus of this particular chapter. And this map graph illustrates the acceleration of growth in urbanization in Middle and South America. You can see among the fastest growth rates in the world, and it's unusual to have a developing realm having rates of urbanization as high as developed parts of the world. So you see North America and Europe, similar to Middle and South America, which is considerably higher than Asia, Africa. So this is really reflecting something of an unusual characteristic of South America and something that we would like to explore in a little bit more depth. A couple of images of cities in South America, specifically Sao Paulo, Brazil. You can see the great wealth disparity with these high-end apartment complexes, swimming pools on the balconies. And if you follow down below, you'll notice that there's a wall, and on the other side of this is a shanty town. These are described as favelas or barrios, and you see some of the characteristics associated with these. Again, you see another example in the image in the upper left-hand corner. This is a real distinction from cities in the developed world that tend to be heavily planned and heavily regulated by the state or by city government. Not so the case in South America. Here's our breakdown of the regions of the realm. I mentioned some of the statistics related to Brazil's ranking in the world. In South America in general, and Brazil in particular, we see among the highest degrees of wealth disparity. You can see some of the statistics that show just how great this disparity is. Some characteristics of the great cities of Brazil, including its forward capital, Brasilia, which is a term related to the placement of a capital city in the interior part of a territory for the purpose of moving population away from crowded coastal areas. Most of the coast cities house most of the population in South America, with the interior being relatively sparsely populated. Here we have the north region centered on Venezuela and Colombia. Colombia's had a large history of problems with the drug trade in spite of their very advantageous geographic position. Things have improved. It looks as though they're beginning to reach peace between the warring factions that have made this such an unstable place. Venezuela has again seen a return to strife and unrest in recent months. They are a very large oil and gas supplier for the region and the world. And then we have the three Guyanas, including the once British colonial Guyana with its capital city of Georgetown. We'll visit that this coming summer. Still opportunities to sign up for our study abroad program if you're interested. Suriname, which was a Dutch colony at one point, and French Guyana, which remains a French colonial holding to this day. And then we have the Southern Cone. This is the most European of the regions, centered on Buenos Aires, the capital city of Argentina, a very European city, as is the country of Uruguay. Chile, the long, narrow strip country on the southwest part of South America, centered on its capital city, Santiago. I wanted to introduce a little bit about the Galapagos Islands and their really unique position in the world, really. You have an island chain that's entirely volcanic, just 300 miles from the coast of South America. And as we know from our studies of Charles Darwin, this is the site at which he studied the very unique plant and animal life and developed his theory of natural selection, which most of us think of today as the theory of evolution. Here we see a marine iguana. It has a common ancestor on land, the land iguana. And of course, this is a place of great biological interest and has become a World Heritage Site with lots of international tourists, including your instructor at one point in 1998. And there are definite benefits to the local people, obviously some local folks that are being employed, but some questions and concerns as well about directing energies and efforts and monies into promoting tourism that doesn't always benefit the local economy. That's the end of my screencast. We'll see you online.